My name is Rory, and I run an animal shelter in southern England. From the moment I wake up to the moment I fall asleep, and sometimes even after I fall asleep, I'm tending to my residents. My associates don't call me Dr. Do-A-Lot for nothing. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I specialize in and have the facilities for animals of the exotic variety. You won't find domesticated cats and dogs at my shelter, which is on the grounds of my home in the countryside. Well, that's not entirely the truth because I have a pet Jack Russell, Jackie O. But other than Jackie O, you'll only find creatures such as reptiles and arachnids, some bird and aquatic species, and a few mammals. They tend to fall under 3 categories. They are illegal to keep in the UK. The previous owners didn't have the necessary licenses to keep them, or the previous owners couldn't adequately care for them. Among my current residents, I have various spiders and snakes, including an inland tapir, one of the deadliest snakes in the world, 2 meerkats, a lemur, and a fennec fox. I keep them during the transition period. They mostly end up in zoos around the country, but sometimes they are released back into their natural habitats, and that brings me so much joy. In some cases, the animals will spend the rest of their lives with me, and so I make it as comfortable as possible for them. Before I get to the point, I'll just get on my soapbox for a moment. Please think long and hard before you choose to keep an exotic pet. The vast majority of owners don't have the education or facilities to keep these creatures, and that breaks my heart. Okay, I'm done. Let me tell you about Birdie. Birdie is a beautiful blue and yellow macaw who came to my shelter 2 months ago. I have an amazing indoor/outdoor aviary on my grounds, which is suitable for a range of bird species. The only other bird I had at the time was a sun conure, otherwise known as a sun parakeet. Birdie's story was he'd been with a single lady owner for the past 2 years, but she tragically died while he was in her care. She was a reclusive person, and her death was only discovered due to her neighbors complaining about loud noises and a vile smell. Her body was in the stages of decomposition when the authorities intervened. Nasty stuff. It's said that Birdie, who had been enclosed in a 5 by 3 feet cage, was crying for help when the authorities arrived. When I acquired Birdie, he was malnourished. The poor little guy, well, not so little, standing at around 2 feet. I introduced him to my sun conure and observed them for several hours. I assumed that neither of them had much, if any, interaction with other birds, so I was concerned they might not get along. When all looked fine, I made myself scarce, returning to find them sharing the fruit and veg bowl harmoniously. That was a relief. Jackie O is well behaved around the animals, despite Jack Russell's having a tendency to be aggressive and vocal. She's a diamond, and I trust she would never attack or make a meal out of my exotic guests. One odd thing I noticed was she seemed to have a fascination with Birdie. It's something I'd not witnessed before to that extent. She's a curious dog by nature, but she'd sit outside the aviary and just stare at Birdie for hours. I wondered if it was his striking, colorful feathers that she was drawn to. But then one morning, as I looked out of my kitchen window that overlooks the grounds, she appeared to be howling at the aviary. I went outside and quietly walked to the aviary to listen. I heard it as clear as day. Jackie O, Jackie O. Birdie was talking to my dog. He'd not said a word since I'd had him. At least not to me. He must have heard me talking to her. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Jackie O talked back by making a series of low howls and quiet barks. It was so cute. "Are you making friends, girl?" I said as I approached them. She turned back to look at me briefly, then continued to stare up at Birdie. "You've been hiding that voice, Birdie," I said as I reached the aviary. "Clever boy." Jackie O, he continued. "Yes, this is Jackie O, and I'm Rory." "Can you say Rory?" "Rory." Birdie looked at me curiously, turning his head from side to side. Jackie O. I laughed to myself. Then Jackie O started to whine a little. "What's the matter, girl?" I asked, bending down to pat her. She put her paw on my knee and continued to whine as Birdie kept repeating her name. But as I paid more attention, it sounded like there was more to it. "Jackie O, no, Jackie O no. The next morning, Jackie O didn't get out of her bed. She laid on her side and gently whined. It was so out of character for her that I didn't hesitate. I picked her up and drove straight to the vet. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. Brain tumor, small chance of survival." The cost and risk didn't matter. I'd have gone bankrupt if it meant she'd be cured. So she stayed with the vet, and I drove home alone, praying for a miracle. I was devastated. On top of that, I was freaking out about Birdie. Was it what I feared? A premonition about something bad happening to my dog? Or was I being paranoid? I quietly observed Birdie as I sat outside the aviary. He looked at me curiously as I cried silently. Then he climbed onto the frame of the cage. He pushed his beak through and I gave him a little smile, gently scratching his head. He didn't speak again until a few days later. I was cleaning inside the aviary and spent a little time socializing with the birds. They were tame enough and happy to be handled. Birdie perched on my arm and lowered his head to my hand, then gently nipped my finger with his beak. It didn't hurt at all and came across as playful more than anything. "Bite, bite," he said. It made me laugh. "Yes, that's right, Birdie. Bite. But don't bite me too hard, will you?" He nipped me a few more times, repeating "bite, bite," over and over until I put him back on a branch. "You're a funny boy," I said as I left him to it. But that night something happened that when I remembered the earlier encounter with Birdie, it sent a shiver down my spine. I was watching television and felt something tickle my foot as I sat on the sofa, followed by a painful sting. When I recoiled and looked down, I saw a large spider disappear under the sofa. It was a Chilean rose tarantula, one of which I happened to have in one of my vivariums. The two small puncture wounds on the top of my foot were sore and red around the edges. Fortunately, these bites are only dangerous to humans who have an allergic reaction to them. So I was fine. I caught the little bugger and put it back in its tank. It wasn't until I began cleaning the wounds that I heard Birdie warning of a bite. From that moment, I was a little cautious when around Birdie, my good girl Jackie O, and the bite could have been coincidences, but it was worrying. I kept our interactions brief in fear he'd start talking again, and I didn't want to hear anything else that spooked me. The good news was that Jackie O had survived the operation. Whether it put 3 years or 3 months on her life expectancy, it was a blessing. She spent her recovery time with my parents, as they could care for her around the clock. I visited whenever I could for cuddles. Some days passed. By that point, my son Conyer had found a forever home. A bird sanctuary up north took her in. It was a relief because I did worry about Birdie's strange behavior affecting her. As I was tending to the grounds, I could hear Birdie squawking about something. It sounded like he was calling my name. "Rory, Rory." I smiled to myself and went to investigate. He'd not said my name yet, despite me trying to teach it to him. "Birdie, did you say my name?" I asked as I approached the aviary. "Rory, Rory," he repeated, his wings flapping. "I'm here, Birdie. What's up?" "Shut your mouth, shut your mouth," he started to repeat. My jaw dropped, but I couldn't help but chuckle a little. "Birdie, that's rude. Surely you didn't call me over here just to tell me to shut up." "Nora, shut your mouth. Help, shut your mouth. Bye-bye, Nora." "Are you saying Nora?" I asked. "Nora, help. Run, run." He was severely agitated, so I stepped inside and gently stroked his back to calm him down. The reality is I could have done with someone to calm me down too. It left me a little shaken up. Later that day, as I was eating lunch, I kept thinking about the troubling incident. He was definitely saying Nora, and I wondered why that name sounded familiar. I looked through my files and found the documents I'd received when I took Birdie on. Birdie, blue and gold macaw. Estimated age, 19 years. Known ownership history, Jonathan and Lori Swift. Weymouth, Sonia Jones. Bangor, Rohan Singh. Ealing, Nora Craig. Ipswich. As soon as I saw that name, I remembered. He'd been with a single lady owner for 2 years, Nora Craig. She'd been found dead in her flat, and Birdie had been calling for help when her body was discovered. I thought poor Birdie must have been having PTSD over the horrid experience. Something that was also worrying was the amount of previous owners he'd had, and those were just the known ones. I did a little research, as much as Google would allow. I'm no detective, but I was curious if there was any information about the others. I typed in Jonathan Laurie Swift Weymouth, and nothing significant came up. I tried the same thing with Sonia Jones Banger and Rowan Singh Ealing. There were far too many results, as expected. I went back and tried Jonathan Laurie Swift Weymouth Parrot. After browsing several pages, I found something promising. It was a local classified ad dated January 2011. Home wanted for tame, intelligent parrot. Birdie is a majestic blue-gold macaw that my husband John and I shared our home with for 3 years. My husband recently passed due to a tragic accident, and I no longer feel I can offer Birdie the care and attention he needs. Birdie is very sociable and requires mental stimulation for his well-being. Ideally, you will have experience with this species. Please contact me at blank if you can offer Birdie a good home. Laurie Swift, Weymouth. My heart broke for that woman, and I hoped she was doing well these days. I tried the same search with the other names. Nothing of note came up for Sonia Jones, but a search for Rowan Singh Ealing Parrot yielded something interesting. It was an article on an online publication I wasn't familiar with. Mystery of missing traveler continues. Do you remember the story of missing London man Rowan Singh? No, you're not alone. In 2018, paramedic Rowan Singh took a 2-month sabbatical to travel solo around China. His family said it had been a dream of his since childhood. Rowan's only dependent was an exotic parrot, which he left in the care of his brother for the duration of his travels. Rowan never returned home. His mother was the last person to have contact with him a week before he was due to. These mystery cases always leave me feeling unsettled. Regardless of what happened to that man, poor Birdie's history wasn't looking good. He needed a forever home. Macaws can live to around 50 years, and that's a lot of potential future owners. I decided I wouldn't let that happen. His forever home would be with me and Jackie O when she was well enough to return. I purchased a large cage and had it installed in my living area. Moving him into the house made me feel better, and it seemed to ease Birdie too. His cage was his safe haven, but I opened the cage door every morning so he had free reign of the house while I was up and around. I also took him outside and let him fly free. My heart was in my throat the first time. I had no idea if he'd come back or fly away. But he came back after flying a lap around the grounds, landing on my hand when he returned. Things were good for a week or so. I woke up at ridiculous o'clock. It was just past 1 a.m., and that was unusual for me. My days are pretty active, and I tend to sleep like a log once my head hits the pillow. "Rory," I heard a familiar voice say. I jumped out of my skin. I saw the outline of Birdie at the end of my bed. I must have left his cage open. "You scared me, Birdie." I laughed, switching on the bedside lamp. He started walking up my bed until he was by my side. "I love you too, but you can't sleep here. What if I roll over and squish you?" He cocked his head at me as his pupils dilated. Then he gripped my wrist with a claw. I yelled out in pain before something terrifying happened. I saw things. A tractor on its side on a country road. A smoking car mangled around a tree. A hospital room. A bedridden woman smiles as a child hands her a drawing of a colorful bird. An arm protruding from a pile of rocks is buried as more rocks fall from a steep cliff. Then I was in a cage. I'm looking through the silver bars. A middle-aged woman walks into the room wearing a dressing gown, drying her hair with a towel. "Nora," I say. "Nora, run." She turns and smiles at me. "That's right, Birdie. Mummy just went for a run." "Clever boy. Run, Nora." She laughs. "I'll run again tomorrow." I'm relaxing now, Birdie. There's a knock at the door. The woman leaves the room. "Get out," she shouts. Then a man's voice. "You fucking bitch." The woman runs into the room and picks up a fire poker. A man runs in behind her and forces it from her hands. He's dressed in dark clothing, wearing gloves and a hat. "Let me go," she screams. He pushes her to the floor, his hands around her neck. "Nora, run, help," I yell over and over. "Shut your mouth." The man roars at me. "Shut your fucking mouth, Bird." Before long, the woman's body is still. The man approaches the cage. "Bye-bye, Birdie," he sneers. He opens the cage and reaches inside. I lash out with a claw. "Keep the fucking noise down." Someone yells. Then there are bangs on the wall. The man runs from the room. The woman never gets up. I cry her name and cry for help. Over time, her body becomes bloated and discolored. Then I was in familiar surroundings, what I call my jungle room, where I keep my creepy crawlies. It's warm and humid, the perfect environment for them. But I'm in danger. I can feel it. Something is pressed against my head. There's an explosion of sound. When I was back in my room, I was screaming out loud. It took me a moment to come to my senses, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Birdie was looking up at me. A small trickle of blood ran down my wrist, and my face was damp with sweat. There came a loud noise from the back of my home. Then the mammals in my care started to become vocal. I ran to the window and looked outside. Several security lights had come on. The shadow of a tall figure was stretched across the grounds, moving towards the house. I heard a smash from downstairs. I turned to Birdie, my eyes wide, and my hands shaking. He stood on my bed looking at me, his wings outstretched. "Rory, run." I froze to the spot for longer than I should have in that situation, only snapping out of it by Birdie's continued cry. He flew at me, and I ran out of the bedroom, stopping on my landing to listen. There was someone snooping around my house. "Oh my God," I whispered to myself like a mantra. It sounded like they were in the kitchen at that moment. Birdie landed on the banister, looking down the stairs. He started nodding his head, then looked at me. "What?" I whispered. "You want me to go downstairs?" He kept nodding his head at me. "Are you crazy?" He jumped down and glided to the bottom of the staircase. "Birdie," I said as quietly as possible, but he just cocked his head and walked out of sight. I stayed close to the wall and slowly walked down the stairs, taking deep breaths. When I got to the bottom, I could see my back door was open. Birdie hopped out, and I listened out for the intruder before tiptoeing after him. It was cold. I was barefoot and only wearing a t-shirt and boxers. Birdie was walking towards the jungle room, which is within a small independent building on my grounds. When he got to the door, he stopped and turned to look at me. Then he opened his wings. I had a flashback to what I'd seen earlier, to what he'd shown me. "I really don't think that's a good idea," I said, looking over my shoulder. He squawked at me, and I put a finger to my lips. "Okay, fine." I opened the door, and Birdie hopped in. I followed him after making sure the coast was clear. It's like stepping into the Amazon, hence my nickname for it. It's filled with various plant life and wall-to-wall vivariums containing all kinds of creatures, but mostly reptiles and spiders. The lighting is low, and it's kept at a constant temperature of 25 degrees Celsius with moderate humidity. I took a moment to appreciate the warmth. Birdie flew up and perched on a plant. There was only one way in and out of the jungle room. "What now?" I said. "We just waited out here." I heard a click from behind me and my stomach dropped. "Raise your hands and turn around," came a voice. Slowly, my heart began to palpitate as I followed the instruction. My hands shook above my head as I met the eyes of a strange man standing before me. He was pointing a gun. "You must be the animal man," he said. "Don't mind me. I'm just here to take some off your hands." "What?" I said. "Some of these critters fetch a fair price to the right buyer. Did you know that?" I shook my head. "Please, sir, don't take the animals. They're very special. They need proper care. They're not supposed to be pets." He started to laugh. "Boo-hoo. Do you think I give a fuck about that?" "I have money," I said, "and some belongings that might be worth something. You're welcome to them. Please, just leave the animals." "Oh yeah, he said. And where might I find these things? I'll get them for you, I said, lowering my hands. No, he snapped. No way. Get on your knees. What? Get on your fucking knees. I started to panic as I fell to my knees. The man pressed the gun against my head. Oh God, I said, my whole body shaking. Please don't do this. Where's the money? There's some in my wallet, I stuttered. By the front door. And upstairs in my bedroom closet. In a box on the top shelf. Money laundering, huh? He laughed. Great, thanks. I'll have a look once these furballs are in my van. He cocked the gun, and I closed my eyes. Don't do this, I pleaded. There came an explosion of sound and my ears rang. When I opened my eyes, Birdie was clawing at the man's hand as he tried to shake him off. Without thinking, I leaped forward and knocked him down, the gun going off again. I heard something smash on the other side of the jungle room. Birdie flew somewhere behind us as I tried to hold the man down, but that was silly. I've never had to defend myself, and I was pinned within seconds. Dumb fucking bird, he snarled, pointing the gun across the room. No, I screamed, grabbing his arm with both hands. I pushed it to the floor with all I had, and the gun slid away from us. I was disoriented as his fist met the side of my face. Then his hands were around my neck. All over some fucking animals. He spat. His face was screwed up into a hateful expression as I tried to free myself from his grip. He applied pressure and I couldn't breathe. My windpipe felt like it was being crushed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Birdie's bright blue and yellow feathers getting closer, and I quietly appreciated his attempts at playing the hero. Tears streamed down my face as my eyes fell on Birdie. But he wasn't alone. Just in front of him was another small creature, one that Birdie was nudging towards us with his beak. It was the inland taipan. Why anyone would think it's a good idea to keep a deadly snake as a pet is beyond me. But in the moment I thanked that stupid person who attempted such a thing. As soon as the man noticed the snake, he freaked out, but I'm not sure if he realized just how dangerous it was. His eyes widened as he let me go and threw his arms out. But the snake was quick. It took a jab at the soft flesh of his neck, and then one on his hand for good measure. I brought my body into the fetal position as it slithered past me, not wanting to risk a bite myself. Then it disappeared into the plants somewhere. Birdie brushed against me as I caught my breath. Looking across the room, I could see the snake's tank had shattered. What are the chances the bullet hit the one tank containing a creature capable of certain death? As I picked up Birdie and stood up on wobbly legs, the man was in the stages of a total body shutdown. He was convulsing and vomiting when I left the jungle room, a real nasty way to go. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Poor Birdie has had a rough go of it in life, but I hope we can be the forever home he deserves. Don't get me wrong. I'm terrified about what he might say or do next, but I guess a heart-stopping warning is better than none at all.